Welcome. Welcome to week 3 of MPAI 600 here at Georgetown University's Applied Intelligence program. Just want to start off with a couple of announcements. So week 5, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have paper 2. Actually, paper 2 is due, but I'm also going to have an office call that Thursday, which will be your briefings if you're in groups 1, 2, and 3. So I want to just give you a heads up that we'll do that at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you are briefing, you'll brief, and if you're not briefing, you can use that time for an office call if there's questions about the paper or upcoming paper or the class in general. Week 7, we also have those briefings for groups 4 and 5, but I'm also going to have a job talk. I know we have a lot of great experience here in the class, and I think people want to advance in the intelligence community, advance in the federal government, get a job in the federal government, transition careers. So I want to use week 7. I'll talk my experiences about getting a job, from trying to get a job to hiring people and what I look for when I'm hiring people. And I also want to solicit opinions from the class. So I know a lot of people in our class work FBI or different organizations, and they might have perspectives that are worth sharing. So we'll have that in week 7. So in addition to the briefings, we'll do a job talk as well. And I'd ask that if you have questions, please let me know beforehand so I can come into that job talk with answers to those questions. Paper 1, the collection strategy, due right now. Depending on when you're watching this. So those of you who had emergency situations, I've given extensions, but otherwise I expect it at 11:59 on Sunday in the Canvas. So current events, North Korea. There's a lot of current events out there this week, but I want to focus on North Korea. One, because I got a couple of questions about North Korea in your current events from last week. I also want to give a heads up that North Korea is going to be a question on the final. And the question, and I'm giving you a big hint here, but the final is going to be apply all that you've learned in this class to a current events issue. One of those current events issues will be North Korea. The other one will be Russian interference with our election. So and you have a choice of one or two. And I just want to give that heads up that a lot of news is coming on both of those subjects. So I would follow the news as we go along. So keep that in mind as we pursue the class. Follow the North Korea threads on the news. Follow the Russian interference in the threads in the news as well. But talking about North Korea in detail. So obviously the Trump-Kim Jong-un talks, and I should probably put that in quotations at this point. I don't know if they're going to happen. If you don't know, Donald Trump accepted Kim Jong-un's offer to do talks, and it's supposed to be done by the end of May. I have my doubts on whether it's going to happen. If it was going to happen, the logistics, where they're going to meet, all those issues should be hammered out now. And I don't think there's much activity being hammered out. So I have my doubts on whether this is going to happen, but I could be wrong on that. But that was a big deal. And the question that comes up, on these talks, and I'll be honest, I don't even know what our positions are, but one of it is giving up nuclear weapons will North Korea give up its nuclear weapons? I've heard that's a precondition to talk. I've also heard that that's supposed to be one of our objectives. I'm here to tell you that North Korea will not give up its nuclear weapons. Not only is it a security issue for North Korea, but it is such a point of national pride. And whenever you see these nuclear tests or these missile tests happen, you'll see these huge celebrations occur in North Korea. So it's a point of national pride. It's a point of Kim Jong-un wrapping his power around his ability to deliver missiles and nuclear weapons, that I can tell you that Kim Jong-un will not give up his nuclear weapons. if we ask him to do that, I guarantee you his response will be, well, why don't you give up your nuclear weapons, United States? And obviously that's a non-issue or something we won't accomplish. So Kim Jong-un will not give up his nuclear weapons, period. So the question is, so what can he give up in a negotiation? And what are we willing to give up? There's things that we could say. We could freeze his nuclear program, freeze it in place. We could say we want inspections to ensure that he doesn't advance in his nuclear program. He can say, okay, I don't want you to give these big exercises every year between the between the United States and the South Koreans. He can ask that we give up THAAD missiles, or THAAD anti-missile defense, which is located in South Korea. And for those of you who don't know, that's like a theater missile defense system that's pretty robust that we have stationed in South Korea. So what I want you to think of is, okay, what would North Korea give up that's realistic? What would the United States give up that's realistic? And that's the whole point of negotiations is, okay, what does the other side want? Is that achievable? Is that politically feasible from our perspective? But again, I can tell you that North Korea will not give up its nuclear weapons. Is Kim Jong-un rational? That is a question for Intel. That's very related to this class. And I've heard a lot of times that he's irrational. In fact, the former National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, said he is not rational because he kills a whole lot of his relatives and he kills his people and he treats his people brutally. I'm not sure that should be a metric for rationality. In fact, he would argue that if he didn't kill his uncles and his generals the way that he did, it would be him on the other end of the firing squad. If he didn't, plenty of world leaders treat their people bad, everyone from Stalin to Mao, but they were certainly rational when it came to the employment of nuclear weapons. Furthermore, Kim Jong-un, or the North Koreans, have had a pseudo-nuclear weapon for the last 20 years. They've had the ability to destroy Seoul, in fact, about 30, 40 years, with artillery. And they've never done that. They know the line to cross, and they know that randomly destroying Seoul would be catastrophic. Randomly destroying Tokyo, which is they've had the capability for the last 10 to 15 years, they know they wouldn't do it because they know we would retaliate in an extraordinary measure. So a lot of people say Kim Jong-un is irrational, but if he's developing these nuclear weapons to preserve his regime, that is the definition of rationality. That means that he is taking consequences into action and making a decision based on those consequences. So I never bought the fact that Kim Jong-un was irrational, that maybe some others believe. But I'll let you decide on that. And then, again, the question is, are these issues game changers? Is really, if Kim were to get a nuclear missile with a nuclear warhead, is it a game changer? As I said earlier, he's had the ability to destroy Seoul for the last 40 years, or the North Koreans have. He's had the ability to destroy Tokyo for the last 10 to 15 years. If he knows that if he ever uses nuclear weapons against Washington or Los Angeles or New York or anything like that, we would obliterate his regime, and he knows that. So does it really change the game if he has nuclear weapons, if he has intercontinental nuclear weapons? Just something to decide. And the only reason I bring this up is war might cost thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and it might not be worth it if we think Kim Jong-un is rational and he's not going to launch these nuclear weapons on site, and it's not a game changer. But I'll let you decide. And then, because it was brought up, the Iran-North Korea comparisons, for those of you who don't know, Iran, we were able to strike a deal with Iran for them to give up its nuclear weapons infrastructure in exchange for sanctions. And a lot of people said, hey, we did it with Iran, why can't we do it with North Korea? several differences here. One, Iran was years away from a nuclear weapon. It did not, unlike Kim Jong-un, it did not have a capable and ready nuclear weapon, didn't have a nuclear capable missile that could strike the United States, continental United States. So that's the first issue. Second, Iran was a lot more, the sanctions worked a lot better in Iran because Iran's economy was a lot more integrated into the global economy. North Korea is a lot more isolated than Iran, so sanctions have less of an effect on North Korea than they did Iran. So those are two pretty considerable differences between Iran and North Korea. And then the other big issue is Iran is a large country. If Iran didn't have nuclear weapons, regime change in Iran using U.S. or any other country's conventional weapons it would not be feasible. Because one, it's a big country, large population, and I don't think any American, let me take that back, most American presidents would not want to invade Iran with conventional troops, especially given our experience in Iraq. North Korea, because it's a smaller country, smaller population, certainly a smaller conventional army, might see nuclear weapons as the ultimate insurance policy to prevent a regime change. While Iran, again, a large country, significant conventional capability, might not have those worries. So just some consideration for the going forward for North Korea, and just, again, think through the intelligence issues related to North Korea as we go forward in this class. So review of last week, again, we had the requirements, and I think we hit on these a lot between my lecture, between the example paper I handed out. Requirements are the first part of the collection plan, and that's just something to consider going forward. So intelligence traps, and that was the second part of week 2. Again, key issues, so confirmation bias. And again, we're going to see confirmation bias come up over and over and over again, whether it's in the Iraq WMD case study, whether it's in the Yom Kippur, Pearl Harbor, or in the 9/11 case study that we're going to go to. And that's just something naturally we do as humans. We come to evidence, and then we look for more evidence to confirm what we already think is happening. That's human nature. And you saw it in the confessions to an extreme degree in that documentary, where, again, they focused in on the one suspect, and they went to ridiculous levels to try and confirm that he was guilty when there was so much other contrary evidence. And then mirror imaging is something that we're going to see in the next few case studies, where we assume, we think that our adversary thinks like us. And this, the North Korea case study is going to be ideal in this example, where are we going to assume that Kim Jong-un is going to look at nuclear weapons the same way that we do? In the Yom Kippur War, which we're going to talk about this coming week, Israeli analysts were, because Israel was strong in aircraft and tanks, they assumed their adversaries would not invade unless they were strong in aircraft and tanks. And they didn't consider anti-tank weapons or anti-tank missiles, or that the enemy would operate in a way that is contrary to what Israel laid its strengths on. So we mirror image all the time. I bet you mirror image in your own personal lives. If you were good at something, let's say, when I was in the Army, I had a boss who was a marathon runner, and he was very good at running. He valued running in all his subordinates. Now, running is a skill. In the Army, it's kind of important, but it's not everything. But because he mirror imaged because he thought that he was good at that. He assumed that must be the most important thing. And I think everyone here suffers from that, not just in the Intel community, but in your day-to-day jobs. So again, the documentary, The Confessions, I bring this up. This is, again, classic confirmation bias. And a lot of you talked about a rogue cop, a rogue detective being involved in this. And before you say that, you have to just keep in mind, it wasn't just a rogue detective. It was prosecutors, judges, juries, appellate courts. All these members of the system failed, and they all suffered from confirmation bias. So it wasn't just one person; it was a whole string of people that resulted in this failure in justice. And then what I'll just say, the last thing about it is, I don't know how many people here are Catholic or Jesuit or religious in nature, and I don't know if it really matters to anybody here, but Georgetown has, one of their value system is justice. And that's kind of one of the additional reasons I brought this documentary up is because there was a gross injustice here. And it wasn't even rectified till about 3 months ago, where these convictions were expunged. But just, again, one of those things to look at is how these biases and how these psychological traps can cause these grave injustices down the line. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. So week 3 preview, 2 case studies, strategic surprise. And just so you know, I love using history as case studies to illustrate intelligence failure. So we're going to go through a lot of case studies from here on in. And even if you're not in the military, even if you're in the business community or local law enforcement, I think these case studies are applicable to, you can derive lessons learned through all sorts of intelligence scenarios going back. So the first is the Pearl Harbor, and the second case study is the Yom Kippur War. I think everyone's aware of Pearl Harbor. Some of you might not be aware of Yom Kippur War. This was in 1973 when Israel, the supposedly vaunted Israeli intelligence service, was caught by surprise by 2 Arab countries invading it. In fact, they didn't know that the Arabs were invading until the day of the actual attack. And again, we're going to talk about intelligence failures at 9/11 and other intelligence failures. But when you think about the Yom Kippur War, think about there was 2 nation states, conventionally armed, that were the focus of Israeli intelligence collection for years. And yet they did not know that a massive invasion was occurring until the day of the invasion. So think about that. We talk about 9/11 being intelligence failure. We talk about even the intelligence failure related to that shooting in Parkland, Florida. But this was a significant one based on the scale and the use of nation states and conventional armies. So what were the failures? As you're going through the failures or the documentaries and the readings, think through the collection cycle or the intelligence cycle and tell me, where were the failures? Were there failures in collection? Was there failures in communicating that information to analysis? Was there failures in analysis? Was there failures in analysts communicating to policymakers? Did policymakers have all the information and fail to act? And was there just underlying circumstances? And this I would just put in the category of stuff happens. I'm hesitant at saying that, but there's certainly times where you can have all the best analysts, the best collectors, and best information out there, and just bad luck happens. And I'll leave it up to you to decide what you think bad luck is. So the documentaries, the readings, Dahl, The Intelligence Surprise Attack, I have a few chapters on that. Excellent book. National Geographic, Pearl Harbor. Again, it's about the movie Pearl Harbor. I'm not going to make you watch that horrible movie with Ben Affleck, but watch the documentary on DVD. And the first 25, 30 minutes explains the intelligence failure surrounding Pearl Harbor in depth. So keep that in mind. And then the Yom Kippur War, you have the Avi Shalim failure and intelligence estimates, along with the Al Jazeera documentary, The Crossing. And that's actually a 3-part documentary. I only make you watch the first part, and the first 30 minutes or so discusses the intelligence failure surrounding the Yom Kippur War. So you have the link for that. So if there's questions or issues, please let me know, and I look forward to reading your papers and interacting on the discussion boards.